Hello everyone, today I will be giving a simple tutorial on how to implement a dialogue system in Unity using the open source dialogue scripting language called Ink. I'll be using the standalone code editor called Inky and their free Unity package. Once you have downloaded the Unity package, you can open up a new Ink file in the Inky editor, and on the left here you can see is the editor, and on the right it will show you a preview of whatever Ink code you're writing. So if I enter something on the left, it should appear by default on the right. In the Ink language, code is grouped together with something similar to methods. They're called knots. So I'm going to make a main knot here, and that will group together whatever branches of dialogue I put inside. So within the main knot, I'm going to make a few choices, which I denote using the asterisks. Whatever you put after the asterisk will be presented to the user as a choice, and then whatever text you put below the choice will only appear if the user chooses that choice, and that creates a new branch of dialogue. So after the text, I'm going to also put the done keyword, which is important because it tells the code essentially that that branch of dialogue is done. So nothing is showing up on the right. What I'm going to have to do is make a reference to the main knot, which I just wrote here, which will basically be like a method call, and it puts it over on the right now. There you can see it. So now if I make a choice, you'll get the response, and there you go, story's over. And go back into the Unity scene where all I added was an NPC. It's just a little cow that you can talk to. And I'm going to start adding UI elements here. So on a canvas, I'm going to add a panel, and I'm going to call that dialogue panel. So you can make this panel whatever size you want, wherever you want it. I'm just putting it at the bottom of the screen. And then on the panel, I'm going to make a text box, and that's where the actual cow's dialogue will appear. So I'm also going to move that around here and make it a little bit bigger. So these UI elements will be accessed within our scripts in a little bit. So when I'm done making this element, I'm going to open up a new script file called Dialog Manager, which I'm going to make here in a second. And within the script file, we're going to need to use a few packages. So first the ink.runtime package, which will let us use the ink files, and then the UI package built into Unity, and also the TextMessPro package. So the first thing we're going to add is a public reference to the ink file that we created earlier, whatever ink file we're going to be using at the time. And then also a public reference to the text box where we want to display the text. So the first thing we're going to do with the ink file is actually convert it to a different type. So in the ink.runtime package, there's included a type called story, and story is a super cool package. It has a lot of built-in functionality that we're going to need. So we're just going to import the ink file and make it into a new story. I'm actually going to make that into a private variable here so we can access it wherever we want within the script here. Alright, so now we have a story, and the first method we're going to want to make is continue story. So this is the method that would be called whenever a new line needs to be added to the text box. So first we're going to check if the story can be continued. So this is just making sure that we don't try to add text to the text box when the story is already over. So what we're going to do, it's as simple as referencing the text box, and inside there we're going to add story.continue, which pulls the next line of dialogue from the story and then discards it after it gets pulled. Alright, so I'm also going to make sure that the text box is set to be active. That's just to make sure we have everything is visible. And then I'm going to make an else statement here, which indicates if the story can't continue, which means the dialogue is finished. So I'm going to make a new method for that. It's just as simple as deactivating the text box. So I just skipped through there. Okay, now back to the update method. I'm going to make a quick if statement here, which just checks if the user presses the enter key. That makes it so that they can progress through the story at their own pace, instead of just continuing the story without them having any input. Alright, so let's go back to the Unity editor now, and all we need to do is add references within our script to the text box and the ink file that we want to create the story from. So I'm going to deactivate the text box by default, and then we should be good to just go back to Inky and create a story without any dialogue options, because we haven't implemented the options functionality yet. So we have this, and we can just play the scene, and every time you press enter, the next line of dialogue will appear. Right now it's super basic functionality, which works great, but now let's implement some dialogue options. So what I'm going to do is add a few buttons to our dialogue panel. These buttons will present options to the user. I just added 4 simple buttons there, and then I can deactivate the buttons by default. Now, going back to the same script file we were working in, I'm going to add an array of buttons to reference the buttons we just made. Make sure that's public. And then I'm going to have to make a new method called show choices. So this method will be called every time we continue the story. And first, what it's going to do is create a list of something called a choice object, which is another built-in ink object. And we can get this just doing story.currentChoices, which shows if there are any choices at this point in the story, it will populate that list with those choices. If not, it'll just be an empty list. I'm also going to make an index just to keep track of which choice we're on. And then now we have the list of choices. I'm going to go through each choice within that list of choices. And what I'm going to have to do is pull the text from that choice and put it into the button from the choice buttons array. So at that index, I'm going to get the text mesh pro component from the child of this button and set the text of that text mesh pro to equal the text from the choice in the choice list. It's a lot of words, but it's really not that hard, and you can just see here it's one line of code. So I'm also going to make sure that the button that I just set the text of is set to active, and then increment the index. After the array has been populated, we're not sure at this point how many choices have been added. So we're going to have to go through with another for loop and go from the current index that we're at all the way to the end of the choice buttons array and deactivate the rest of the buttons. Now we have one last method to implement for now, which is the set decision method, which takes in the choice index of the choice that we want to select. And all this method does is it sets the choice index within the story object that we have, which is just a built-in method, as easy as that. And I'm also going to go up top because I forgot to do this earlier, and show choices should be called every time you continue the story. Alright, now back to the set decision method. We're going to make sure we continue the story once a choice has been selected so that the flow of the story keeps going when you make a choice. Now that's pretty much it for the code. We can go back to the Unity editor, and all we have to do is link the buttons up so that it can interact with the script we just wrote. All I do for that is add an on-click event for each button, which is going to reference the public set decision method that we just wrote, and it's going to pass in the decision index. So I'm going to do that for all 4. It's the same thing, just a different index each time. And then we're going to add references to those buttons within the script. So the 4 buttons have to be dragged in there. And at that point, we're pretty much done. Now we can run it now. And all I did was I made a little bit more of a complex ink file here. You can see that there's more choices, and I have the choices actually kind of influence the outcome of the game. It's just a little showcase of what you can do with this system. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's how you make a dialogue system in Unity using the Ink editor. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.